Hello, welcome back to another Ohio Valley podcast. Ohio Valley podcast number 7, I think. We've been doing these on Sunday nights, having cookies and crickets. I think Richard just got the endorsement of the Crickets Union because they are loud tonight. So this is how you win an election. Here's a secret: coffee, 2 sugar, lots of cookies, and crickets. Hi, Richard. What's new?
Well, Toby's not interested tonight. He did not meow, but he's walking away from us.
Yeah, that's his cat. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that's what's the latest. But
okay. So you picked up another endorsement, right?
Yes, a couple.
Okay. Tell us what they are. Yeah.
The latest major one was the Teamsters Drive out of Akron, which is all of Ohio's Teamsters locals, and then, of course, we're in negotiations, and we're looking real positive with the Ohio Valley, what they call Labor Trades Council, which is different from the Upper Ohio Valley Construction Trades. It's an AFL-CIO trade council. So we met last Thursday. They're on board, and then with that comes the communication workers, which is the AFL-CIO.
Okay.
So
nice.
But the operating engineers who endorsed earlier in the summer have really come around, and they've been really, very positive. And we had a really long talk last week. They're engaging the campaign, and I feel really positive. Thanks to their contact in Columbus, Mark Stedman. He's been fantastic, and I think before we end, we'll have 14 or 15 endorsements in the next couple of weeks.
Nice.
And by the end of 2 weeks, so feel really, real confident. Thank God for the working man and women of the Ohio Valley.
Absolutely. All right. It's getting crunch time. So when is the absolute last day to register to vote here in Ohio?
October 5th is the day. Technically, the last day is 6th, but you should register before on the 5th. And I would even do earlier, obviously.
Yeah.
Of course, as a mail.
Sure.
But and there's various places you can obtain the registration forms, including the Democratic headquarters, the new Democratic headquarters down in Washington 4th Street, across from the old 407 Hotel.
Yes. Yeah.
And of course, Board of Elections, and there's some organization. I think this week, which is kind of good, Carmen, is the several of the historical churches in town are going to be having registration drives, which we're really excited about, and they're going to be organizing it among themselves. So in about a week or so, you'll see some church activity, registering folks also. Urban Mission, I think, might even do a registration drive.
Cool. Okay. If you would explain just briefly, how does like mail-in ballots vote versus absentee and all that, how does that work?
Well, really, in a sense, there's really not a difference between the two. I mean, we've been doing absentee voting for decades, and as long as I can remember. And as you know, absentee is for those that are usually incapable of getting to the polls, or elderly, or service members, or people who just are rather vote because of some disability, or just a decision. Maybe they don't want to go to the polls that day. I think it's a mail-in is just it's more of a extension of that, which is you have to apply for your ballot early, and now you have to do it in writing. You apply to the Board of Elections. Those applications can be obtained in different locations as well, similar to what I was just saying about the registration forms. And then you do have to send in your application or drop it off, and then they send you a ballot. So it's very similar to absentee. Absentee works on the same theory. I would say they're almost one and the same. It's just that because of COVID, we're calling it mail-in voting. And again, one of the things that concerns the Democratic caucus this year in Ohio is a decision was reached recently by the Secretary of State, who's Republican, he's limiting the drop boxes to 1 per district, 1 per Board of Elections, which is kind of odd. When you think of what's going on, there's no reason why you can't have 4 or 5 drop boxes spread throughout a county, like Belmont or Jefferson.
That would help all voters, right?
Both Republican and Democrat and independent. So, but he came up with a ruling recently that he just wants 1 drop box per voting district, which Democrats, of course, have come out and criticized. And I think it is an issue of why, because it would facilitate people. But there is a drop box that is at the head, the front of the building, which is the Towers building downtown. And it's the Board of Elections office. But It's those kinds of issues that are causing some stress and controversy for the Democrats, saying there shouldn't be. You already have a strained system. Why make it a little more complicated?
It should be easier, not harder.
We see what's going on with the national and the post office, and it's had its own weight and its own decision controversy. It's just unbelievable. In Ohio, I think they've taken down 4 or 5 mailboxes. They've stopped that, but as you see at the national level, the Postmaster General right now has said that he's not going to replace the high-speed machines that he took out of the post service in different places of the country. There's no reason for that. That's one reason he wants to slow down the mails, so he would slow down the mail-in voting and cause people to be delayed.
Okay, just to be clear, if you receive a mail-in ballot, you don't have to mail it in. You can fill it out and drop it off, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And you don't have to just drop it off at the box. You can go inside and actually give it, hand
Right.
deliver it. So it's called mail-in balloting, balloting because
Yeah.
voting because your ballot is mailed to you. In some states, they're actually mailing the ballots to the people directly. Of course, the other side is saying that's open to fraud and there could be fraudulent balloting. But Governor DeWine said in a national interview a few Sundays ago on CNN that we've been doing absentee voting for decades, and there's no problem with it in Ohio. He says that both parties have access to checking for fraud. It's not just a Democrat or Republican issue. Both parties have access to the voting Board of Elections. The Board of Elections are made up of a shared Republican-Democrat committee. There's you can ask for monitors. It's a felony.
And that's serious.
It's a felony 3 or a felony 4 or felony 5 on different levels for any Board of Election official or polling worker to tamper with a ballot or tamper with a box or open up a ballot improperly. I don't see people who are making modest wages, decent enough, but modest wages that are career election officials risking a felony because they're going to stuff a ballot box. I don't see that happening too often.
So the parties can kind of check each other.
Exactly, and that's what Governor DeWine said. He said it's been going on for years, and I'm sure there's always cases of voter fraud on both sides down through history. You can point to certain things, but massive voting fraud isn't going to occur because we have absentee balloting. Absentee balloting has been the way the military. We had 245,000 soldiers posted around the world not long ago. If they wanted to vote, every one of them, they could have voted by absentee balloting, and those would be counted. So to say the armed services is committing fraud, massive fraud because they have forward stationed troops in Germany, in Okinawa, I think is a bit stretching the truth.
Okay. All right. So as far as the campaign, where do we go from here then?
Well, it's kicking off. Of course, it's gearing up, and traditionally, most campaigns do truly kick into gear out upon Labor Day. So it's
Right.
It's upon us. We've already started putting signs out, and that's the beginning of the campaign serious ground game. And the campaign's really been happening already. But so we're getting ready. We're doing our first stages. We've had some activity at the junior fair last weekend. We've also had some interaction with officials, and mostly I have been personally getting out and driving around some towns and cities and neighborhoods and areas and just seeing people out and being able to talk with them. And even with COVID, the mask on, I stay in my car. I've had a lot of response by just driving through, say, Martins Ferry's neighborhoods or Crestview out in the Oh봢o area, or going down to Brilliant and going door to door. I don't knock on the door to have people come to the door, but I put literature.
Yeah.
And both sides are really doing that right now. So it's underway. Soon, though, we'll kick in the part where you start seeing ads and radio and some other kinds of campaign traditional activities.
Okay.
It gets expensive from here on out.
Well, of course. Speaking of funding, what's the best way for someone to contribute?
Well, there's a couple ways. Obviously, the simple way is to write a check to We Are the 96 and send it to 391 Westwood Drive, Steubenville, Ohio,
Okay,
and
fair enough.
43953. That's the simple way. There's also online, though, Act Blue account, which is on the Facebook accounts and we'll put it on the podcast later. But I have an Act Blue account, which is pretty traditional, and the House Caucus wants us to use that. I also have a GoFundMe page. There's even people sending some money through PayPal. So,
Nice.
but traditionally speaking, if you get a hold of, say, the Democratic Party chairman or the Democratic Party headquarters, and you want to donate, they'll direct you to how to do it. But on my site, I have my address, and it's on the web pages and on the Facebook social media. But I would certainly any amount is like Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
$25 goes a long way.
Right, right,
So
right.
nobody's excluded, and we appreciate any amount. And we appreciate. I really want to say thanks to the building trades so far. The local, particularly this summer, have been really stepped up, and they've been very helpful. Appreciate all their support. And as we've been making a theme, my labor background has been, I think, sounding a chord with the working class and the labor unions, and I appreciate their support, and I know they appreciate my record on labor.
I know you have past accomplishments, and hopefully, if you have the opportunity to serve come January, you'll have some more.
Yeah, it's going to be. I think we're seeing a time in the country. We know union membership has been down for a number of years, but as one person put it, analysts, the pendulum tends to swing back in this country. We go from conservative eras to more liberal eras.
Sure. Yeah.
We go from less involvement in unions to more, and I think we're in an upswing. We're going to go into an upswing, particularly if the economy tanks or it gets more difficult before it gets better because of COVID. I think more and more people are going to realize the value of collective bargaining, particularly though with that, as we talked about before, one of the big fights I anticipate coming up, regardless of what happens at the national level, is going to be the fight over right to work laws, and that lobby that promotes right to work is very actively going after public sector unions, teachers, fire, police. They're strongly oppose unionization of the public sector, and that's where the battle is going to be in the legislature in the next couple of years. And I know that's where I'm going to be in the middle of that fight if I'm elected.
Okay. Just to be clear, what exactly does right to work mean?
Well, it's a euphemism, and the people that promote that, it actually is the opposite. What they do, they try to pass laws, and they do pass laws in certain states. Michigan has it, West Virginia, where they decouple the public employees' ability to pay into the union through their dues. And by doing that, they shrink the funds for which public employee unions can fund their pensions. Therefore, they weaken the union period.
I see.
And what it leads to is a complete loss of public employee unions, because if they can't have the funds to pay benefits, then there's no use to have a union.
Okay.
And there's other issues involved, but primarily they've tried 2 years ago in Ohio to introduce that bill, and the speaker at the time did not move the bill. It was introduced, but he didn't move it. There's also been referendums put on the ballot where it's been defeated, thankfully.
Okay.
But they're not going to give up, and in fact, I was questioned very seriously at the beginning in the year when I first announced by the Right to Work organizations out of the state, from Virginia and from Washington, D.C., asking me whether I support collective bargaining unions for the public sector employees. And there's been a conservative Supreme Court opinion that was in their favor that said the public sector employers can stop union dues from being paid. So it's a very critical time for public employee unions, teachers, firemen, police officers. And it's interesting because you have a conservative movement wanting to support police, and at the same time, part of their agenda is to, quote unquote, defund the police through defunding the public sector unions.
Well, we're not going to do that, obviously. There's not going to be defunding of police. It sounds like defunding the police. It's kind of like they're trying to say maybe reallocate funds for better training. I mean, am I reading that right?
Yeah. What's happened in certain major cities, and this is a critical point, it came out in a letter we wrote to the editor a couple of weeks ago. In certain places like Minneapolis, they do want to completely defund the place and destroy it and start over.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, what they want to do, they might have a model that they can work with in a city like Minneapolis, but in our areas, in Ohio, there's no need to enter that debate.
Right.
But what's interesting, and again, I go back to some of the Democratic candidates have picked up on one thing. About 6 years ago, Governor Kasich basically defunded the small cities and towns. They've been struggling with their water. They've been struggling with their infrastructure because of the way the state government took money out of the localities to pay the state budget. So in effect, you defunded a lot of the local police departments. In fact, what I've heard, I have to look at the facts, is that there was certain organizations that oppose increasing the levies for police and fire. And one of them happened in Steubenville, and they defeated the levy here 2 years ago that was going to better fund the police and the fire.
Yeah.
And apparently my opponent took a lot of credit for defeating that levy, for defeating that levy. So when they talk about the funding locally, what they're talking about is, in effect, and some of the Democratic mayors have picked up on this, they've already defunded the police in a Republican sense, that they say no new taxes, don't increase those levies. Well, if you don't have levies to run your police department if adequately, you're basically, quote unquote, defunding the police. Now, that's a little different than with the national issue.
Okay.
The national issue is what you were talking about.
Yeah.
In New York, for instance, they have $1 billion budget for police. They can take a couple $100 million and put it in housing and child care and early prevention. That's the real.
So it's reallocation, not necessarily dismantling the police, which we are opposed to. We're not going to dismantle them.
No, I'm definitely not for defunding police departments, and we can't do it
right
on a local level. And no, even Nancy Pelosi said that, and Joe Biden, his position is he's not going to defund any.
That's not going to happen, right? Yeah.
What we could do is increase grants to proper training, but that's kind of been going on for a number of years.
Okay.
I do think, though, in major cities that where they have a multi-billion-dollar budget that goes to the law enforcement, they might be able to allocate a little bit more money to housing instead of building up and giving more firepower.
So it's about balance.
It's a balance.
Okay.
And I think that's where most moderate advocates are. Now, that's not to say there aren't some advocates out there saying do away with police departments. And, it's an interesting academic
That's
concept,
not going to happen, yeah.
But in Minneapolis, there might be a very good reason for literally fracturing the department, firing all the officers, and bringing a whole new crew in.
Oh, wow.
That can happen. And the city council has voted for it, actually.
Man, this gets complicated, doesn't it?
It's not simple.
I guess not. Yeah.
So there's it's a deep issue.
Right.
There's a lot of complexities to it. It's not no one simple
really,
solution.
yeah. Okay.
But there's a lot of good work going on out there with police.
Oh, sure.
What I mean, and even there's a lot of progressive criminologists today, professors and observers, and I welcome. We don't want to support the looting or the burning of cities, but on the other hand, the protests do bring a point that we have to change. There has to be we're at a point in this country where this problem
legal protest, not the looting. Yeah. Right.
Well, what it is, it's people giving voice to the frustrations of decades. It's not because of one or two or three people. I see counter posts saying, well, what about the white boy that was shot in Georgia? That's true. It's a horrible crime.
Yeah.
But we're talking about a systemic historical problem in this country that's been going on for 100 years. So, and yes, every life matters. The white boy that was shot in the face by a black male, it's a tragic, and he's going to be dealt with in the criminal justice system as he should be.
Yeah.
However, when you have systemic official police misconduct happening at record levels throughout the country itself has to change. We're not Russia in the past. We're not former Soviet Union. It gives an image to the world. We are considered by the world to be the source and the fountainhead of human rights. So when it goes across the world today on a cell phone or on a video that makes it on Instagram around the world instantly, and you see a cop kneeling for 9 minutes on an African American's neck, regardless of the circumstances, the world reacted.
Technology has changed everything, right?
So you have 100,000 people in Berlin in the streets you have Singapore marching because they're shocked that in America,
Right.
one of our officials, agents, is basically murdering somebody by suffocating them. And London gets it, Berlin gets it,
Yeah.
Paris got it. America can't afford this it's not just a police issue. It's an image of what America is.
Yeah.
And what you see is
Wow.
the unrest in the streets.
Man, this is complex, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it opens the door to, unfortunately, what we're seeing, the division.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be divided over whether we want good police in the streets. I think everybody agrees
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
understanding
Yeah.
of this issue that we need good policing, and we need police that are actively involved in solving crimes. At the same time, I talked to a veteran captain in the sheriff's department here in Jefferson County not long ago. He says, Richard, in my 32 years in my career, I had to use serious force once.
Only once.
Once. He says,
That's awesome.
I asked him, I said, how is that? How does that come about? He says, because I show respect to those that I'm arresting, Rich.
Wow.
And that was his words. He says, because I show respect, I get respect. So I think it comes down to that officer.
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
I'm sure there's officers out there who have been spat on. They've been subjected to horrible,
Unacceptable
behavior. That's not acceptable.
Okay.
It's unfortunate. And so we're not going to promote, we do not want to promote attacking police officers like we saw in that video.
That broke my heart. There was something on Facebook, a police officer just going back to his car, I guess, to call back up, and it looked like a hubcap tagged him in the back of the neck. I mean, it's sickening. I mean, that's not going to solve anything.
It's a crime, and it was horrible. Then they were cheering that on.
That's wrong.
And the officer was only going into his car.
Right.
He wasn't acting.
He's a human being. I mean, geez.
And he was vulnerable, and he knew he was in a
totally wrong. Yeah. Wow. Okay, this may have to be a two-part podcast here, but lots of good info. So I think it's no question that we know who's qualified for the job, at least in my humble opinion. But I have to be honest, Richard, these crickets are putting me to sleep. Nothing personal, but I think I'm ready for bed. But okay, we'll have to continue this on the next podcast. So again, if you have any questions about these podcasts, OhioValleyPodcast@gmail.com. You can send us an email. Richard Facebook page, we are the 96th. And he's also accepting a box of cannolis as a bribe. No, that's just a joke.
But I want to say with that, as we end up we're coming up on Labor Day, and I want to shout out to all my friends in labor that we intend to have a little meeting here in the backyard of our house and kind of have a little barbecue. So we'll be talking to you a little soon this week on social media or get the word out there. We're going to want to congratulate all those and commemorate and give honor to the hardworking people coming up on Labor Day, and look forward to that. And thank you for your support.
Awesome. Okay, well, don't be shy, get involved, and I'll just say arrivederci. Ciao.